Dobra, chyba jest OK. Świetnie. No dobrze, moi drodzy, witam Was bardzo serdecznie na kolejnym naszym wykładzie z cyklu Nurkowie Pomagajmy Sobie. Na samym wstępie, jak zwykle, podziękowania. Dzisiaj naszym tłumaczem symultanicznym będzie Magda Łutek. Magda zareagowała na nasz apel o pomoc, dlatego że potrzebowaliśmy pomocy w tłumaczeniu, dlatego że Michał niestety nie mógł dzisiaj nam pomóc. Natomiast Magda tutaj zaoferowała pomoc, także Magda, bardzo Ci jeszcze raz dziękujemy. Więc moi drodzy, serdecznie witam po raz kolejny. Kolejne spotkanie z cyklu Nurkowie Pomagajmy Sobie. Dzisiaj bardzo ciekawa prezentacja, zaraz dowiecie się jaka i o czym dokładnie. Ja tylko tradycyjnie przypomnę, że cała akcja, cała nasza praca, cała praca naszych wykładowców i ich czas ma na celu zwrócić uwagę trudnej sytuacji baz i centrów drukowych w Polsce, więc na dole w opisie macie link do naszej strony www.nurkowanie pomagajmy sobie. Moim marzeniem jest, żeby każdy chociaż 5 zł tam wpłacił gdziekolwiek, bo pamiętajcie, że w takich akcjach zyskujemy dzięki ilości, a nie dzięki wysokości tych kwot. Także dowolną wpłatę na dowolne centrum drukowe, jeżeli każdy z nas by zrobił, to na pewno nasza akcja odniosła wielki sukces. Ale przejdźmy już do części właściwej. Michał, kto będzie dzisiaj naszym gościem?
Dzisiaj mamy gościa prosto z Florydy. John Chatterton, bardzo znany nurek wrakowy z wschodniego wybrzeża Stanów Zjednoczonych. Znany przede wszystkim polskiej publiczności jako odkrywca U-869. I ta historia opisana jest w książce Roberta Kersona W pogoni za cieniem, która była opublikowana i o czym się dowiedzieliśmy od Johna niedawno, było to jedno z pierwszych tłumaczeń zrobionych w ogóle tej książki właśnie na język polski. John oprócz tego jest bohaterem kilku dokumentalnych filmów o tematyce nurkowej, między innymi filmu Struma, który był wyprodukowany przez sieć HBO. Był członkiem pierwszej ekspedycji u wybrzeży Irlandii na wrak Lusitania w 1994 roku. Pamiętajcie, że mówimy tutaj o naprawdę głębokich nurkowaniach. Był też pierwszym nurkiem, który podczas eksploracji wraku Britannic na 120 metrach używał rebreathera. Z ciekawostek wykonał ponad 160 nurkowań na niesłychanie trudnym wraku Andrea Dorii, a dzisiaj opowie nam o eksploracji kolejnego wraku. John, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael. And thank you very much for inviting me to this event. And when I started wreck diving, I was living in New Jersey. And you know, as wreck divers do, you start talking about shipwrecks. And obviously you talk about the shipwrecks that you're diving. But the thing that you really start to become passionate about is the shipwrecks that have yet to be found. And for a diver in New Jersey, we spent a lot of time talking about a World War I wreck, the SS Carolina. And it was sunk by a German U-boat at the beginning of the entry of the United States into World War I. And the Carolina was sunk, and there were everyone got off the ship, got into 10 lifeboats, and most of them were rescued that night. One of the lifeboats that night overturned, and 13 people lost their lives. They were drowned. And there was a single lifeboat that remained afloat for 2 days and eventually came ashore in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And Atlantic City was a social, a seashore town. And they were having a convention. The Shriners were having a convention, and this lifeboat was said to appear out of nowhere, and with survivors from the boat, the ship Carolina. But anyway, you know, a lot of divers were talking about, oh, I'm looking for the Carolina. Or, I know where the Carolina is, and you know, if you knew where it is, why don't you go dive it? Well, and of course, you know, it was deep. We know it was offshore. But the thing is, what most divers knew was the history that was really on the surface. And so for me, when I got to the point where I made the decision, I want to go out, I want to find the Carolina. I realized that if I just did what everybody else was doing, I was not going to be successful. So I figured, where is the information that no one else has? Now, you know, I mean, I wanted to start off. I started off with things like, you know, looking at the newspapers of the day, and you know, the big headlines, you know, oh, U-boat and sinks 6 ships in a single day. And that's great. Initially, you know, I start reading these articles from the local newspapers of the time, and I realized that the press back in 1918 was not any better than the media and the press that we have today. So there's a lot of words, but you know, it's a little short on accuracy. So you know, I started getting more and more into little smaller articles with more information and maybe less sensationalism. And I'm going through and I'm starting to get a lot of information. And certainly one of the pieces of information was that all of the people who were rescued, either their lifeboats were picked up or the lifeboat that came into Atlantic City, they were all interviewed by naval intelligence, because of course the United States, having entered into World War II, they viewed these people who had interacted with the Germans as a source of intelligence information. So I was like, okay, well, if I go to the National Archives, maybe those documents still exist. And so I went to the National Archives, and I started to really develop files of you know, of documents, you know, and these are statements given by the passengers, not just on the Carolina, because the U-151 was a submarine that on this day it sank 6 vessels in total, 5 vessels and the Carolina. So there was a lot of information in the National Archives about not just the Carolina, but about this historical event. So what's my goal? My goal is I wanted to know the details of the history. I wanted to know the history that nobody else had gone out and uncovered yet, because that was the thing that was going to lead me to the wreck. And you know, so I'm acquiring historical information. You know, I found there are a couple of books of the period, German subs in Yankee waters, and there was even, because the Carolina was owned by the New York and Puerto Rico Steamship Company, and it was coming from Havana, Cuba. So I found a book in Spanish that was entirely about the Carolina and the sinking of the Carolina. And naval intelligence in the United States after the war produced a book, German Submarine Activities on the Atlantic Coast of the United States and Canada. So I'm really starting to acquire a tremendous amount of archival information, firsthand information. It's not been diluted at all. So I'm going through it, and I'm starting to take this information, and I want to get it into spreadsheets. And now I'm thinking it may be easier to find 6 wrecks than to find a single wreck. And certainly one of the problems is, and I found this out when I was going through the naval intelligence interviews, you know, the captain would give one location of the ship. The first officer would give another location of the ship. And you know, the helmsman might give a third location for the ship. And these were all dead reckoning positions. They had no electronic navigation. They were heading to New York, but it is, you know, they're 70 miles offshore. So their actual location that they're giving is that they're giving a very simple latitude and longitude that is roughly a square mile of ocean. And you know, if it were really accurate, maybe that would be usable. But when I plotted the locations of all 6 ships, they were so spread out that it would have been impossible for the submarine to have gone all over the place. And so when there's some great information in the American records, but clearly the navigational information wasn't accurate. Now, at this point, I was relatively familiar with the U-boat archives in Germany. Now, at the end of World War II, the British were coming into Germany, and they took the U-boat archives. Now the U-boat archives, this was the place where they stored all of the KTBs, the log books, the official documents of the German submarine service. But it wasn't just from World War II, it was from World War I as well. So all of these documents were cataloged, they were microfiched, and they were made available to researchers. So I'm already from my work on the U-869, I'm already very familiar with the German archives, but it's like, well, all of the navigational information for the location of the wrecks from the U.S. side is coming from a bunch of different sources. Well, if I go to the KTB, to the logbook of the U-151, maybe that would be a little bit more uniform. And so, you know, I did that, and I started coming up with not just the documents, but I started coming up with hard information, and even a chart that was made by the captain of the U-151. So he's got a chart overlay. Now he may not have known from a navigational standpoint exactly where he was, but he knew the relationship of one of these shipwrecks to the next. So I've got U.S. documents that are less accurate than the documents that I'm getting from the Germans. And I'm taking all this stuff and I'm putting it into spreadsheets. You know, I'm trying to manage the different locations, not for one wreck, but for 6 wrecks. So I really feel like I'm making a lot of headway. I really feel like I'm looking at documents that no one who's been looking for the Carolina has been looking at. And I feel like I'm looking at the wreck in a different and fresh way. So I know probably more about the history of the Carolina at this point than anybody I know. What else is important? If I'm gonna find the wreck, I don't just want to find the wreck. I want to identify the wreck as well. So now I want to start looking at the ship itself. Well, how do I get information on the ship? Well, I started out working for looking at information and Lloyd's of London and get the basic data about the ship. But one of the first questions that comes up is where was it made? Okay, it was made in Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock in Newport News, Virginia. So are they still a viable company? Well, yes, they are. So I called them up. And the operator answers, and she's like, where can I direct your call? And I said, public relations. So directed my call to public relations. The vice president of public relations answered the phone, and I explained my name is John Chatterton. There was a ship that was built in your yard in 1896, and it came back again for a refit in 1915, and the guy, I could tell the guy was just like, He's like, okay, let me transfer your call to our archivist. I'm like, they have an archivist. They have an archive of 100 years of shipbuilding, more than 100 years. So they transferred the call, and who answers? The woman who answers the phone sounds old and angry, and like maybe she's smoking a cigarette and drinking some whiskey at the same time. She's like, archives. So I'm like, I explain, I go through my thing and I explain who I am and what I'm looking for, and she's not interested. She's like, well, I don't think we have anything that goes back that far. But she says, I'll look around and I'll call you back in 2 weeks. Of course, she doesn't call me, and I wait the 2 weeks, and then I call her back, and she had done such an excellent job of blowing me off the first time that she didn't even remember talking to me. So I had to start from the beginning, and and now I'm calling, I'm kind of like pestering her, and this is going on literally for months. So I'm trying to, what is my problem? What is the problem here? The problem is she has zero interest in me and my project. So I'm like, how do I get her interested? So I sent her a dozen yellow roses through a florist, and with a nice little card, and I'm like, here's hoping you can help me with the Carolina, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, next thing I know, she's calling me. And now she sounds like a giddy teenager. She's like, oh, she goes into the archives. She finds all kinds of stuff. She finds photographs from the refit. She finds deck plans. She finds all sorts of archival materials. And basically, it's the only time I've ever dealt with an archive where they sent me materials and they never billed me for the photos or anything. So now I understand the history of the wreck. I have archival materials on the ship itself, what the ship looked like, how the ship was built. I've even got a copy of the specifications. This is the specifications, hull number 172. This is how they, every single rivet, nut, bolt, I've got all that. And I've got a little chart overlay. So I'm thinking, okay, I know a lot. How do I make use of this information? When it comes to finding the wreck, what do I do? So I'm thinking somebody knows where these wrecks are. So I go down to the fishing dock and I ask around, who's fishing the wrecks offshore? Who's the guy that everybody wants to be? Who's the best guy out there? People say, oh, it's Paul Regula on The Bounty Hunter. He's out there all the time. He's out there every day. So I go find Paul Regula and I basically say, my name is John Chatterton. I'm looking for the wreck of the SS Carolina. And he goes, oh, I know right where the Carolina is. I said, you know where the Carolina is? He's like, yeah. I said, how do you know it's the Carolina? Are you a diver? He says, no. He says, the Carolina was, I know the history of the Carolina. It's a big steel wreck. I go out there, I fish it all the time. My customers, sometimes their line gets tangled up in the wreck. And when they bring it up, the hook will have fouled on an anemone growing on the wreck. And I'll take the anemone and I'll turn it over to the side where it attached to the wreck. And if it's a metal wreck, the bottom will be all rusty. If it's on a wooden wreck, the bottom will have some pieces of wood on it. He says, it's a big wreck. It's metal. It's the Carolina. And I said, well, you know, there were two other big metal wrecks, the Winnicon and the Texel. How do you know the one you think is the Carolina is not the Texel or the Winnicon? And he says, that's a very good question. I don't know that. And so I explained to him, I said, you know, I've got this chart that I made from the German numbers. The captain of the U-151 actually made a little chart. I made it more detailed. I translated his logbook from that day. And I've got a chart overlay. Why don't we see if we can put my chart overlay on your chart of the wrecks that you're fishing and see if we can line up the 6 wrecks. So now he's interested. He's like, okay, we put my overlay on his chart and we line up 5 of 6 wrecks. And of course, the first thing he's thinking is like, I got to go try and find this other one out here. I was like, yeah, okay. But he very much now is looking to, like, you know, work with me, partner with me. He's like, when do we go? So now he wants to go and he wants to use his boat. What could be better? So we go out, we get down on the wreck, and it looks like the Carolina, but there's a big net over the fantail, which is still relatively intact. But I can't read the name off of the stern. But so after the first dive, I get back on the boat and I'm looking through some of the archival material. I find the photographs that I got from Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock, and I really figure out where the name is exactly. So instead of having to remove the whole net, it's big, heavy commercial fishing net over the entire stern. So I can just kind of figure out where to go and start cutting the net to find the letters that I'm looking for. So, you know, on my second dive, I go down, I go right to the stern, I figure out where I am, and I start cutting the net, and I see the letter R. So I'm like, okay, I'll move a little over. I find the C, I open it up. This positively identified the wreck as the Carolina. 2 dives. I never would have got to that point without working with, you know, Paul Regula, the fishing boat captain, without the archivist, without the people in the, you know, the National Archives, Maritime Archives. Everybody I talked to, I tried to encourage them to help me. I tried to get them on my team. I tried to get them interested in my project. And as I acquired information, I just kept, you know, trying to manage it in ways that would move me along. On the second trip to the wreck, the first trip we went out and identified it. The second trip to the wreck, which was about 2 weeks later, it's 70 miles off the coast of Atlantic City. So 70 miles out, 2 weeks later, I go down on the wreck. I'm trying to kind of get an idea of, you know, I spent some time in the stern. Now I'm going to go a little bit up on the bow, and I'm trying. Now my dive's over and I'm coming back and I'm running a little bit late, and I'm swimming along, and you know, I'm kind of swimming along, just looking down. And I look into an opening in the wreck and I see a large metal box with little short stubby legs and a dial on one side. And I said, this is really interesting, but you know, I'm running late, gotta go. So I left, and that was my last dive on the Carolina that season. But I'm like, I think that's the ship safe. I think that's the purser safe. And knowing the history, I know that the purser was one of the 13 people who drowned in the one lifeboat that had overturned. So we don't have a statement from him as to what was in the safe, but all of the interviews that they did, the people said they went right to the lifeboats. As a matter of fact, this is the lifeboat that came in Atlantic City. This is a photograph of some of the survivors, and they're wearing these like denim shirts, you know, the men and the women, and they said they left. You know, it was dinner time. Many of them left dinner. They got in the lifeboats. They did not return to their rooms. They did not grab anything. They were dressed for dinner when they got in the lifeboats. And after the ship sank, they found this crate from cargo floating on the surface. And it was a bunch of denim shirts that were part of the cargo on the Carolina. So I'm thinking there's probably going to be some stuff on in the safe. And I get an attorney who is also a diver, and he made me a deal we're going to go arrest the wreck. So I arrest the wreck, and we make up the paperwork, and we go to the court, and the clerks are all running around, and I tell the lawyer something's not right here. So I said, go see what's happening to our paperwork, as we're waiting to go in to see the judge. Well, we didn't know it at the time, but throughout the court system, Judge Joseph Rodriguez, who was the first Hispanic federal court judge in the state of New Jersey, was known throughout the court when he was giving the oath of American citizenship to immigrants who were becoming naturalized Americans. He would tell the story of his father, and his father had come to America on a ship that was sunk by a German U-boat. And he spent 2 days in a lifeboat, and he first set foot on American soil, climbing out of the lifeboat onto the beach in Atlantic City. The judge's father had been on the Carolina. So, of course, it's the judge is in the middle of a trial. He stops the trial. He's like, bring these guys in here. And he starts, and he's telling me, he said, my father died in a car accident in 1979. Both of my parents died in a car accident in 1979. So they're no longer here. But my four brothers and I grew up listening to the stories my father told of being in the lifeboat and the ship sinking. And we always thought, it's dad. But you seem to know quite a bit about the history. Tell me what it was like. And ultimately, not the judge, but some of his brothers came out to the wreck when we were diving the wreck. And I was lucky enough to do some salvage work there. And let's see, I'm going to bring this up. When I first started this is a painting of the Carolina, and it was basically, it was made from this grainy black and white photograph, and it was a postcard. So if you sailed on the Carolina, this is what they would, you could send a postcard back home. And it's a single stack with a very vertical bow, and the lines of the ship are very much turn of the 20th century lines. But there was not this was the photo that mostly appeared in the newspapers, and there wasn't much else. When I got the archival materials from Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock, this was after the refit in 1915. You can see the letters, Carolina, New York, and there were a bunch of other pictures leading up to this. You can see they're flooding the dry dock here. The ship is all done. I can't tell you how often I looked at this photograph and I wondered about this guy standing on the fantail right here with that roll of drawings. Like, what's he got under his arm? Where can I find those? That's what I really want. But anyway, these are the letters that eventually I'd get all the letters off of the fantail, and certainly that's how I identified the wreck. You've got the letters up on the bow here, which I never did find, But you know, it's another you know, you can see that it's in dry dock here, and another great archival photograph. This is, you know, I had to get this stuff translated because obviously it was in German, but you know, it's like, you know, I've got, when you look at this stuff, it's like, oh yeah, there's some navigational information right there. So I brought the safe up, and there was a bunch of stuff in the safe. I've got some photographs of some of the stuff. These are diamonds. These are sapphires, and you can see how this locket, the hinge still works on it, but the locket itself was like crushed from the increasing pressure. As the pressure is increasing, the locket was sealed enough that the gold just pushed in and was deformed. This is a gold choker, that necklace. This is a gold bead necklace. There's no string in this. It's a very unique jewelry maker's creation. Each gold bead is connected to the bead before and after it. A very cool piece. All gold. Some of the gold coins you can see 1877, 1854. These are the big ones are $20 gold pieces, then $10 gold pieces, then $5 gold pieces. And this is a wedding band that had a date and initials in it. I gave this to a genealogist to see if I could track down descendants of the original owner of this, but nothing ever came of it. And this was a very nice piece of gold rosary. The cross is gold. All the beads are gold. The connections are gold. Very nice. And this cool little charm bracelet here. These are Spanish escudos from the 1700s, and they were by a jeweler. They were fashioned into a little charm, and here's a skeleton key, and the padlock is brass, not gold, but kind of a cool little thing. And this was a gold cross that was in there, and this is the same thing where the pressure differential as it's sinking, as the ship is sinking, is the pressure is actually crushing the relatively speaking lightweight gold. So I think now would be a good time for us to take some questions, if you guys have any questions about the SS Carolina.
Thank you, John. We have quite a few questions. Not all of them are related to SS Carolina, but actually the first one is from SS Carolina. So who keeps the jewelry from the safe on SS Carolina?
Because I went to court, I had to go through the court process. All that stuff's mine.
All right. We will not ask where do you keep that. Next question.
Michael, hold on, because the audience cannot hear you.
Okay.
So just give me a second. Magda, can you please mute your mic when the mic? No, sorry. If you mute your mic, the audience won't hear you anyway. So okay, just sorry. Continue, and Magda will translate because we are translating this. I think this will be fine. But Magda, can you please translate also Michael's questions? Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right, so our next question is about the discovery of the wreck, right? It is about SS Carolina, but you also discovered other wrecks. So percentage-wise, how much is digging into archives and looking for information, and how much is actual diving?
Oh, it's like 90-10. You know, no matter how good you are at diving, you know, you have to jump in the ocean at the right place. And once you're on the wreck, you know, the wreck is big. If you're looking for something in particular, you're looking for something of value, you're looking for something important, you have to know where you're going. To just get in the Atlantic Ocean and swim around, you're not going to be successful. You know, I say 90-10, it's probably 98 and 2%. You know, when I was in the Dominican Republic, we were literally, we would do survey after survey, and I'd want to make sure the survey was correct. I'd want to make sure I had all the historical information. I wanted to make sure all of the pieces fit together. Okay, now I'm ready to jump in the water.
So next question is about any other wrecks you have on your bucket list to discover.
Yes. I don't like talking about things I'm going to do. I like, after I've done something, I'm perfectly willing to talk to you, to talk about it publicly. But the thing is that, you know, as I have had some incredible success in diving. I've been just incredibly fortunate. The thing that nobody has written a book about all my failures, and that could be a pretty big book. But it's like, if I'm not successful with something, you know, I still kind of like, you know, I haven't given up on it. So, you know, yeah, there's still, people often ask me, what's your favorite wreck? And my answer is always the next one.
So I need to ask that question then. So what's your biggest failure then?
You know, I was looking for a wreck up in Maine, and you know, had a bunch of historical information and all that kind of thing, and I paid a guy to do a side scan survey, and the wreck is not where we expect it to be, and but we find another wreck that is, you know, I mean, we get a detailed side scan image of the wreck, and we start, you know, measuring it, and literally the side scan was so good you could see the rivets on the hull plates on the bottom, and we found the bow but not the stern, and it's like, oh, you know what, we got it, and we go down to dive it, and we're like, you know, we're pretty sure this is it. You know, we're literally pulling a tape measure underwater, and then we ultimately find out that there was another ship that was like cut in half, and just by coincidence, the length and beam and all the measurements, the type of construction and all that stuff, it was just like, it wasn't the wreck we were looking for, but it was just like the one that we're looking for, but not the right one. So we'd done all this research on the wreck we were looking for, not other shipwrecks.
That is cool. So our next question is actually about Andrea Doria, because you did over 160 dives on Andrea Doria, and that's not super deep wreck, right? 50 meters, 165 feet.
Yeah.
What makes it so dangerous for divers? Because there is lots of accidents happening during those dives.
You know, originally when I first started diving the Doria, we were all diving air, and the real attraction to diving the Doria was that it offered limitless penetrations, and you know what, relative to the marine environment, you know, currents and that kind of stuff. Once you got inside the wreck, you were okay. But you were inside the wreck. Don't get lost. Now the wreck has the wreck is aged. It's compressed. It's different. It doesn't have those type of limitless penetrations, but you know, it's in an area with you know, it's deep, dark, dangerous water. It is, you know, there's strong currents, and there is everything from fishing nets to cables and all kinds of things. So you know, it is the dangers have changed over the years, but I think the real danger in the wreck is the fact that people get kind of caught up in the idea of diving the Andrea Doria, looking for artifacts and bringing something up and having that as an item on their resume. But it's certainly there's been a big number of tragedies of diver fatalities there. We're not going this year. We because of the COVID thing, we canceled our trip.
So another question about the wreck you may come back to. So U-869, are you still coming back to dive that wreck?
You know, I tried to dive it a couple 2 years ago, and we just, you know, that we didn't have the weather. What we dove the Carolina, but not the U-boat. So I would like to go and dive the U-boat. The thing that I've really noticed about the U-boat, and I've noticed this on other wrecks, but for some reason the U-boat is really for me, it's really noticeable. When I think about the diving I was doing there 30 years ago, the wreck seemed so, the wreck was big. Now the wreck seems smaller, and I think it's almost like, you know, it's like going back to school, and you look at the chairs and the desks, and you go, I thought the chairs and the desks were bigger than this, but I guess not. So for me, it is it's still, you know, the wreck is naturally compressing and that kind of thing. But I still enjoy that wreck. It's awesome wreck.
So I need to ask that because, again, it's very well known amongst our Polish diving community, mainly due to the book. So what's your favorite story from the discovery of that wreck, or from any dives you did on that particular wreck?
Well, you know, the initial dive, obviously, you know, the discovery dive where you're trying to figure stuff out is, you know, and we were diving air back then. So it's like, you know, you're in 230 feet of water. It is, it's exciting. It's challenging. It's intellectually challenging. But you know, the dive where I actually brought up the box that positively identified it, where I went back, you know, I was trying to get a second box, and you know, I think the initial dive was very exciting and full of promise. And I think over the years and after fatalities and you know, and just struggling with things like weather and all that, you know, I really just wanted to identify it and put that behind me. So, you know, for me, I think in terms of the contrast between, you know, starting something out where it's very, everything is new and unique and different at the end, and then the end where you're really, you know, I was doing stupid things just to kind of bring it to a resolution. And you know, I think thinking in those kind of terms helps to try and make you a better diver.
John, thank you very much for your stories. We are extremely grateful that you decide to spend precious time of yours and tell us the story. It's really great to hear it. And once again, we are very appreciated that you decide to support us with your talk.
Well, you know, thank you very much for having me. You know, I want to thank you guys for putting this together, for trying to bring the diving community together, and you know, but because of the current pandemic and all that, I think it's a very positive thing. I'm very proud of you guys, and I'm glad I could help in some small way.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch to Polish now, but stay with us, please. So
Okay.
Maybe you understand something, but I don't think so. No dobrze, moi drodzy, więc doszliśmy do końca naszej kolejnej prezentacji. Bardzo Wam wszystkim dziękuję za wysłuchanie. Dla mnie to była wspaniała prezentacja. Muszę powiedzieć osobiście, książka Johna to był dla mnie krok milowy w mojej karierze nurkowej, bo przez tą książkę podjąłem decyzję o tym, że zacznę nurkować technicznie, także dla mnie wysłuchanie historii Johna zawsze było fantastycznym przeżyciem. Nasza akcja prawie dobiega już końca. Mamy jeszcze dla Was jedną prezentację, której powie Wam za chwilę Michał, a ja tylko przypomnę, że wszystko to, co robimy po to, żebyście Wy tam na dole kliknęli i najmniejszy grosz nawet wpłacili na dowolne centrum lub bazę nurkową, bo to wtedy daje nam satysfakcję, że to, co robimy, ma jakiś sens. Także Michał, teraz zapraszam Ciebie, powiedz nam, co dalej. Michał, mikrofon masz wyłączony, poczekaj. Jesteś zmiutowany, musisz się odmiutować.
Właśnie, o, już. Dla niektórych to lepiej, że nie miałem mikrofonu przez chwilę. 4 czerwca seria mini prezentacji na temat, czego nie nauczyły nas wypadki nurkowe, gdzie nie dość, że będziemy prezentować, ale też dyskutować na temat wypadków nurkowych i wniosków z nich idących. I to już 4 czerwca o 19:00 to będzie zamykająca tą serię Nurkowie Pomagajmy Sobie prezentacja, więc zapraszamy serdecznie do tego. Więcej informacji będzie lada chwila na Facebooku i na naszej stronie. John właśnie pokazywał nam książkę, którą jeżeli jeszcze nie przeczytaliście, W pogoni za cieniem, Robert Carson, to bardzo, bardzo polecamy, bo jest to dobra książka. Myślę też, że warto podziękować Magdzie Łupczak, która wsparła nas swoim profesjonalnym tłumaczeniem, bo mieliśmy taką potrzebę. Magda od razu się zgłosiła. Dziękujemy, Magda, bardzo za Twoją pomoc. Myślę, że tutaj pojawia się gdzieś informacja. Jeżeli ktoś z Was szukałby profesjonalnego tłumaczenia, to Magda jest gotowa Wam pomóc i podobnie jak wszyscy, którzy uczestniczą w tej akcji, wsparła nas swoją pracą na zasadzie wolontariatu, więc tym bardziej bardzo, bardzo za to dziękujemy.
No to co, dziękuję bardzo za uwagę wszystkich i do zobaczenia w przyszłym tygodniu.